Part 1. The first thing on the screen is a marble staircase, filmed from the height of a man's chest, climbing one slow step at a time. Shine, steady, recording. Recording's live, Chloe said in my ear. 2 words, nothing else. That was the whole reason I existed in this house. I stood at the front door of the Sinclair estate with a white cane in my right hand and a pair of dark glasses I would never take off. To everyone here, I was blind. That was the point. The door opened before I touched it. A tall man in a gray suit, older, careful, the kind of face that had opened this door for 30 years and judged everyone who came through it. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "I'm Arthur. Please, come in. There is a step at the threshold." "Thank you," I said. I found the step half a second before he warned me. I made sure to look like I'd found it by luck. Inside, the hall smelled of cold stone and fresh lilies. Somewhere above me, a woman's heels were coming down the stairs, unhurried, expensive, the walk of a person who has never once waited for an elevator. "You must be the new man," she said. "I'm Eleanor Sinclair. My father's estate." "My rules." "Miss Sinclair," I said, and offered my hand to a point slightly to the left of where she actually stood. Small thing. Blind men miss. She didn't take it. She looked at it, then at the cane, then at my glasses, and something in her shoulders let go. I felt the whole room let go with her. "He shook your hand at the wrong angle," Chloe murmured. "She liked that." She did. People always like the proof that you're exactly as harmless as they were told. Then she did the test I'd been waiting for. A set of keys slid off the side table and hit the marble beside my foot, dropped on purpose, and I turned my head to the sound and reached for nothing, because that is what a blind man does. "Sorry," Eleanor said, not sorry at all, watching me the way you watch a thermometer. Clumsy of me. "It's all right," I said to a spot past her shoulder. "I heard where it landed." "He heard where it landed," she repeated, pleased, and picked the keys up herself, and I felt her last small doubt fold up and go quiet. "Let me show you the house," she said. "You'll have to learn it by memory, I suppose. That's how you people manage?" "That's how we manage," I agreed. She started up the stairs and, God help me, she began to count them out loud. 6 steps here, hold the rail, she said, slow and warm, the way you talk to a nervous animal. Then a landing, then 6 more. Take your time, there's no rush at all. She talks to me like a Labrador, I thought. This goes in the report. I took the rail. I climbed the 6 steps. I did not touch the edge of a single one, because I had walked this staircase on a floor plan for a very long time before I ever walked it with my feet. "You're doing wonderfully," Eleanor said. "You're very kind," I said. At the top, the marble ended and old parquet began, a hairline seam under the runner that no cane had told me about yet. I stopped with my toe exactly on the line. Eleanor did not notice. She was already talking about the east wing. But Chloe noticed. "You stopped on the seam," Chloe said quietly. "Careful. Even I almost believed you were guessing." Careful was the whole job. 2 years of careful. 1 clumsy foot and all of it burned down. "Can you orient by sound?" Eleanor asked, turning back. "Some of you can. It's remarkable, honestly, the way you cope." "I manage," I said. "He manages," she repeated to Arthur, delighted, as if I'd performed a small trick. Isn't that something? I kept my face still and let the glasses do the only thing they were built to do, which was to look straight at Eleanor Sinclair and remember her. She walked me through it like a museum guide who has decided the exhibit can't hear her. The library, the gallery, her father's study, the long window where the garden began. Every door a name. Every name a place on a map I already owned. "My father is a busy man," she said outside the study. "You won't have much to do with him. He tires easily these days. You're here for me." He tires easily these days. I set that sentence on a shelf where I keep the ones I'll want later. "For you," I said. "For me." I heard the smile more than saw it, a thin, satisfied curve. A quiet, steady presence. Someone who watches the door and doesn't get in the way. "That's what I'm good at," I said, and for once I told her the exact truth. "Good." She turned to Arthur without turning to me. "Show him his room. He's had a long trip." Then she walked off down the corridor without looking back, the way you set down a thing you've decided is furniture, and her heels counted their own steps this time and did not slow for anyone. "She didn't say goodbye," Chloe noted. She said goodbye to the room, I said. I was already put away. Arthur cleared his throat softly beside me. This way, Mr. Hayes. 4 doors on the left. I'll count for you if it helps. It helps, I lied, and let a kind old man count doors I could have found blindfolded, which, I suppose, was the entire joke of my life now. You'll get used to her, Arthur added, lower, the way old servants say the one true thing and then pretend they didn't. She means the house no harm. She's just in a hurry lately. In a hurry lately. Everyone in this place kept handing me the story for free, one careless line at a time. Behind me, on the little screen no one else would ever watch, Eleanor Sinclair turned a corner and vanished, and the recording light stayed exactly where it had been since the threshold. On. The whole time. On. Downstairs, a phone was ringing, and a man's voice, deep and impatient, was already answering it. That would be the father, the one I hadn't met yet, the one the whole house tiptoed around. Day 1, Chloe said. You're inside. I'm inside, I said, and touched the frame of the glasses once, lightly, the way a blind man checks that his world is still there. Mine was. It was recording. The corridor to my room ran the length of the first floor, past the study door where Charles Sinclair's voice lived. It came through the wood in pieces, hard consonants, a name repeated, a demand I couldn't place yet. Not now, the voice said behind the door. David, not now. I filed the name. David, said the way a man says a tool he's tired of reaching for. Eleanor had gone ahead of me and stopped at a side table to look at a phone that wasn't ringing. She was waiting for something. I stood where a blind man stands, patient, useless, and watched her not wait through the corner of a lens she thought was glass. A door opened to my left and a new man stepped out with a folder under his arm. Middle height, good coat, the smooth face of a person who bills by the hour and rounds up. Eleanor, he said, and then he saw me, and the sentence stalled in his mouth. David, she said. This is the new one, Hayes. Don't mind him. David looked at the cane. That was the thing I watched. Not his face, his eyes, going down to the white cane in my hand and sliding off it like water off glass, the way you look at a mop left against a wall. He was vetted? David asked, quiet, already half turning away. Agency for the disabled, fully bonded, fully cleared, Eleanor said. Blind since a car accident, references a mile long. He's perfect, David. He watches the door and he never sees a thing. He's perfect, I agreed silently. You have no idea how perfect. David started and dropped his voice on the next word out of pure instinct. Eleanor gave the smallest shake of her head. He's blind. Don't bother. David's voice came back up to full volume, reassured. He's fine then. Good. We should talk about next week. He lowered his voice. Then he reconsidered. I respect the rationalism, even from a man I'm going to bury. Next week, Eleanor agreed. The schedule? Moved, David said. Wednesday's meeting to Monday. The lawyers. Before the doctors. In that order. In that order, she said. Lawyers before doctors. I turned the phrase over without moving my face. Strange order to put the words in, for a healthy man's house. You said Monday, Eleanor said. You're certain? I said Monday before you asked, David answered. And there it was. So small you'd miss it if you weren't paid to catch small things. He had the answer before she finished the question. They rehearsed this. They rehearsed most things. And the paperwork holds? She asked. If someone looked. No one's going to look, David said. Who would look? Who indeed, I thought. Some blind man by the wall, maybe? Somebody harmless. Recording, Chloe said, out of habit more than need. Time stamped. I turned my head a fraction toward the study door just as Charles Sinclair's voice rose again behind it, a beat before Eleanor flinched at the same sound. She caught herself. I made sure I hadn't moved too fast. A blind man hears first. That's allowed. That's even expected. Your father wants you, David said. My father always wants me, Eleanor said, and the warmth she'd used on the staircase was gone from her voice, packed away like a coat in summer. David slid the folder from under his arm and set it on the side table, and as he did, he angled his body between the folder and me, turning his shoulder like a man shielding a card in a game he's already sure he's won. He was hiding paper from a blind man. I almost admired the reflex. It meant some animal part of him didn't quite believe in me, and that part was correct, and it would be the part that hanged him. I read the label on the folder anyway, upside down, in the half-second before his coat covered it. A name, a date. Enough. The glasses don't forget the things I'm not supposed to have seen. Tomorrow at 8, Eleanor said. My office, not his. 8, David said. She left. Her heels went one way, the study door swallowed the father's voice the other, and David stayed behind exactly 1 second longer than he needed to. He looked at me. I felt it the way you feel a draft. He was checking something, the way you check a lock you're already certain of. I gave him nothing. A pleasant, empty, patient nothing, aimed a little to the left of his face. "Good night, Mr. Hayes," he said, testing. "Good night, sir," I said, to the wrong spot. He made a small, satisfied sound and walked off after Eleanor, and did not say the thing he'd stayed to say, and I let the glasses hold on his back until he turned the corner. "He almost said something," Chloe said. "He'll say it eventually," I said. "They all do. That's the job. I just wait." Dinner was served in the long room with a table built for 20 and set for 1. Charles Sinclair ate alone, fast, half out of his chair by the end of it, a man eating the way you sign a form you resent. I stood at the door where a bodyguard stands, hands folded, glasses forward, a fixture near the wall. I had never seen his face in person before. I looked at it now for as long as I liked, because the man had no idea a single open eye was in the room with him. "You," Charles said suddenly, without turning. "New man. You were a soldier or a policeman before the eyes?" The first honest question anyone had asked me all day, and of course it came from him. "Neither, sir," I said. "Just careful." "Careful," he grunted, as if the word tasted like something he'd lost. "Careful men make the worst guards. They flinch." "I'll try not to flinch, sir," I said, and watched the man who had once decided my whole life with a signature go back to his plate, bored of me already. Beside that plate stood a squat brown bottle and a glass of water, and a little dish where a tablet waited to be taken with the last of the meal, the same as every night, I would learn, at the same hour, in the same careful order. A man with a routine is a man with a schedule, I thought, and a schedule is just a door left open at a known time. I didn't look at the bottle again. I didn't have to. The glasses had it. Eleanor came in with papers, the way she came into every room now, at a small run dressed up as purpose. "Father, next week, the meeting." "It waits," Charles said, not looking up. "It really can't. It waits, Eleanor." He stood, dropped his napkin on the plate, and left the room, and he did it without one glance at his daughter, the way he'd probably left every room she had ever tried to hold him in. Eleanor stood there with her papers. She watched the door he'd gone through a moment too long. Then she pressed the papers flat against her chest, and her face did something quick and private that I caught and kept. "He'll sign it," she said, to no one, to the empty doorway. "He always signs it in the end. He just likes to make me ask twice." She didn't know she'd said it out loud. Or she thought the only ears in the room were sightless, which in her mind was the same as deaf, which was the mistake the whole plan stood on. Over her shoulder, on the wall, hung a portrait of the man who'd just walked out. Charles Sinclair, younger, painted to look kind. Through the lens, I let the frame rest on that face a second longer than a blind man ever could. "I know you," I told the paint. "You don't know me. You signed the thing that ended my old life without reading the name at the bottom. You'll read it eventually. Everyone reads it eventually." "Careful," Chloe said softly. "You're looking at him too long." "I'm allowed one look," I said. "It's day 1. Eleanor turned back and remembered I was there, a shape by the door, harmless. You're free until tomorrow. Get some rest. I'll want you in the morning, early." Free until tomorrow. Dismissed like a driver who'd gotten her home safe. I inclined my head at the wall a foot to her right. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Good night." She was already gone, already on the phone, her voice sliding low and smooth as she rounded the corner. "It's handled," she was saying to someone. "By the weekend, it's all handled. Stop calling me here." "By the weekend, it's all handled." I let the words fall into the recording with everything else. Gently, the way you set a stone on a scale and watch the needle move. I walked the corridor to my room, counting nothing, because I didn't need to. At the door, I stopped, and the little light held steady,
And I did the math the way I did it every night. Quiet, exact, the only prayer I had left. Day 1, 8 hours, 23 minutes of recordings. Progress. Get some sleep, Chloe said. It gets louder from here. It always does, I said, and I stood at the door of my room in a house that didn't yet know it was going to be a crime scene. And I did not reach up. And I did not switch the glasses off.
Part 2. Charles Sinclair died in the night, in the same study where he'd told his daughter that everything could wait. I was awake for it. A blind man sleeps light, they say, and I'd made sure to be the kind of blind man who wandered the halls when he couldn't sleep, cane tapping, harmless, learning the house by ear. That's the story. The glasses tell a different one. They hold the 12 seconds that matter, and I will not spend those seconds here. Not yet. Those belong to a room with a screen and a great many chairs. You're steady? Chloe asked in my ear, low, the closest she ever came to a human question. I'm steady, I said, and I was. This was the day the whole thing had been built for. You don't shake on the morning you've waited 2 years to reach. By dawn, the study had the wrong light in it. The same desk, the same chair, the same portrait on the wall, and all of it lit like a room where something had ended. A doctor stood in the doorway with the particular tiredness of a man who has said the same sentence too many times. Miss Sinclair, the doctor said. I'm very sorry. His heart, most likely. At his age, with his schedule, it isn't unusual. We'll know more once. We've done the paperwork, but I wouldn't expect surprises. We'll know more once we've done the paperwork. In another house, that line would mean an autopsy. I wondered how long that paperwork would survive contact with Eleanor Sinclair. Is that necessary? Eleanor asked, gentle, grieving, reasonable. He was a sick man, doctor. He hated a fuss. I'd hate to make one now. It's routine, the doctor said. Nothing more. I'll note that the family prefers to keep things simple. Thank you, she said. He would have wanted simple. He was a good doctor and an honest one, which is exactly why he'd see nothing. Honest men don't go looking for the thing that isn't supposed to be there. She just talked him out of the one test that could have ended her, in the voice of a woman arranging lilies. Then Eleanor stood very still. She nodded once, and she waited. I counted it. 3 seconds. That was the entire funeral in her chest. 3 seconds of a daughter losing her father. And I heard the exact instant it ended, because on the 4th second, her voice changed. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said. Warm, correct. Then she turned to David, and the warmth came off like a coat. Call the lawyer, today. The doctor was still in the room. He hadn't reached the door yet. I watched him hear it, watched the small stumble in his step, the way a man adjusts when he's decided not to have noticed something. Out in the corridor, a young member of staff stood with a tray, close enough to catch it, and I saw her eyes drop to the carpet and stay there. 2 witnesses to the same 3 words, and neither would ever say so. Today, David repeated, and glanced at the doctor and understood and smoothed it over. Of course, I'll reach him this morning. She just scheduled the inheritance during the condolences, I thought, multitasking. I keep a list of the things I'm not allowed to say out loud. It's a long list, and it got longer. Eleanor crossed to the desk. She laid one hand flat on the wood where her father used to sit, held it there a moment, and took it away. It was the most grief she showed all morning. I think it was real. I also think it changed nothing, and both of those can be true about the same person at the same time. Recording, Chloe said softly. Time-stamped. I've got the doctor, the room, the autopsy she just waved off. All of it. Through the glasses, I let the frame settle on the empty chair, not on Eleanor, on the chair, on the man who wasn't in it, the man who had ended my old life with a signature and never learned my name, and who had died before I could make him learn it. There's a cost to waiting this long. That chair was part of the bill. You're looking at the chair, Chloe said. Too long. He got out early, I said. That's all. Some people always leave the room before you're finished with them. David moved next, and I nearly missed it because it was the kind of motion a man makes without deciding to. On the corner of the desk lay the folded schematic of the house, the estate floor plan Eleanor had used to narrate my little Labrador tour. David picked it up. He carried it 3 steps and set it down again on a far table, away from me. Away from the blind man who couldn't possibly read it. He didn't know why he'd done it. I did. Somewhere under the smooth lawyer face, a small nervous animal had counted the people in the room and moved a map away from one of them. The animal was right. The man would never listen to it. That gap between them is where I live. David, Eleanor said, phone already in her hand, stop rearranging the furniture. Sorry, he said, and looked at his own hands like they'd embarrassed him. She lifted the phone to her ear, and someone answered, and she said, It's me, it's happened. Given the circumstances, I'll need you to move quickly. A pause. Whoever was on the other end understood the circumstances perfectly. She didn't have to explain a single thing. That's the sound of a plan built long before the morning it was needed. People improvise grief. They rehearse everything else. Yes, Eleanor said, the reading. This week, if it can be done. She listened, nodded to no one. I understand. Yes. Thank you for your discretion. Thank you for your discretion. On the day her father died, before he was cold, she thanked a man for his discretion. I have sat through a great many confessions in my old life. Very few were as clean as the ones people make when they're certain the only witness in the room is furniture. She ended the call and stood there, composed, already 3 moves ahead of her own grief. Then she remembered the shape by the wall. You, she said, Hayes. There's been a death in the family. You'll stay close today. People will be coming and going. I'm very sorry for your loss, Miss Sinclair, I said, to a point a little beside her. Something flickered across her face. Not guilt, impatience maybe, at having to accept a condolence she had no use for. Thank you, she said, the word costing her nothing, and she walked out of her father's study without one glance back at the chair. The door closed behind her. I stood alone at the wall with a dead man's office in front of me. I let the glasses turn, slow, all the way around the room. The desk, the chair, the portrait, the pill dish, already rinsed and set to dry by someone efficient. Someone had cleaned that dish before the doctor finished his sentence. I didn't need to say anything about it. The glasses had it, and saying a word was the one thing that could still lose this whole thing. Day 2, Chloe said. You holding up? I'm working, I said. That was the honest answer, and she knew to take it as one. The house filled up the way houses do around a death. Quiet feet, lowered voices, the small, busy industry of people who don't know what to do and so carry things from one room to another. I stayed near Eleanor through most of it, the loyal blind man, the fixture she had stopped seeing entirely. That was the job. Be a wall. Walls hear everything. By afternoon, she'd had enough of being watched grieve. She stepped into the corridor with her phone and turned toward the corner by the tall window, the private corner, the one that was private only because a blind man was standing in it. I was 3 meters away. She might as well have handed me the receiver. It's Eleanor, she said. No, I'm fine. I need this clean and I need it fast. The will is read Wednesday. I'm counting on you being in that room. A voice answered, thin through the phone. Her jaw tightened. No, she said. No delay. There's nothing to review. My father's wishes were very clear, and I'm not going to let a formality turn into a circus. Another answer, longer this time. She closed her eyes with the patience of a woman explaining a simple thing to slow people. I understand your concern, she said in a tone that understood nothing of the kind. Wednesday all the same. Thank you. She hung up. I counted 4 legal terms in 22 seconds. A first-day record, and it wasn't even my first day. I keep the jokes because the jokes keep me slow, and slow is the only way this ends the way it's supposed to. Arthur came to her then, quiet, holding a black folder against his chest the way he'd held every duty in this house for 30 years. Miss Sinclair, about the arrangements, the service. When would you like it? After the reading, Eleanor said, without looking up from her phone. Wednesday first. We'll see to the service after that. Arthur didn't move. A small pause, the length of a man deciding not to say a thing. Of course, he said at last. The reading first. The reading first. The funeral could wait its turn behind the will. Even the butler had to stand there and swallow the order of it, and I watched his old careful face decide, like the doctor's, like the girl with the tray, to have heard nothing at all. David came down the corridor with a single sheet of paper. He stopped close to her, closer than he'd ever stand if he thought a seeing eye was near, and dropped his voice into the register men use for the real conversation under the polite one. Prescott wants a meeting before Wednesday, he said. Prescott. A new name, set down in the dark like a coin on a table. I picked it up and kept it and gave no sign. No, Eleanor said. He's on the board, Eleanor. He's not nobody. If he starts asking why the reading's being rushed, then he can ask after it's done, she said. Not before. There is nothing to find, David. We just don't hand anyone the time to go looking for it. There is nothing to find. I have heard that exact sentence spoken at the precise moment there was a great deal to find, more times than I can count. It isn't a lie people tell others. It's the one they tell themselves, right before they hand you the shovel. And the doctor? David asked, lower still. He said paperwork. The doctor said routine, Eleanor answered. The doctor said simple. I made sure of it. Let it go. I made sure of it. 2 words for the death of an autopsy. The glasses took them the way they took everything, without comment, without mercy, and set them beside the rinse dish and the 3-second funeral. David nodded, unhappy. Eleanor walked off toward the stairs, done with the corridor, done with the day's performance. And David stayed a moment. I watched what his hands did while his face believed no one could see them. He looked at the sheet of paper, a list of names, the board, printed in a neat column. His finger came up, moved down the list, and stopped. It rested on one line, pressing, the way you hold a thing you're not certain you want to keep. Prescott, I thought. He's stopping on Prescott. Even the accomplice has one name that keeps him up. Good. I always like to know where the cracks are before their owners do. Then David caught himself, folded the sheet and slid it into his breast pocket, and turned to find the blind man still standing patiently against the wall, exactly where a blind man should be, seeing nothing at all. You'll want to move him upstairs tonight, David said to the air near me, not quite to me. Out of the way. There'll be people in the house. Ask Miss Sinclair, I said pleasantly. I go where I'm put. He almost laughed. Almost. Something in it wasn't funny to him, and he couldn't have told you why. Right, he said. You go where you're put. Then Eleanor's voice came back down the stairs, sharp, final, the last order of a very long day. David, the meeting, in 3 days, not 1 day later. Get every one of them in that room. 3 days, David said, and wrote it down. I turned to follow her, and my cane found the floor ahead of me. Tap, tap, the sound of a harmless man doing his harmless rounds. 3 days. A reading, a board, a room full of chairs. She was building me an audience and calling it a schedule. I have been handed a lot of gifts in my life. None of them ever came wrapped as neatly as this one. You heard her, Chloe said. 3 days. I heard her, I said. So did the archive. I climbed the stairs behind Eleanor Sinclair with a dead man cooling in the study below us both, and I did not hurry, and I did not slow, and the little light stayed on the whole way up. Part 3. The morning after a death, a rich house pretends to be normal, and I got to practice being blind in daylight, which is harder than it sounds. There's a rhythm to it. You let the cane arrive a half beat before your foot. You look at the space beside a voice, never the voice itself. You learn a house wrong on purpose, so the moments you know it right look like luck. David came down the second-floor corridor with a folder under his arm, and I came the other way with my cane, and I decided to be a little bit lost. Excuse me, I said, aiming my voice a touch wide of him. I'm still learning the upstairs. The office on the east side, is that to my right or my left from here? David stopped. I felt him take a breath, the small patience people spend on the helpless. Right, he said, slow. Go right, then straight to the end. The door's on your left. You'll feel the runner change under your feet. That's kind of you, I said. It's a big house to hold in your head. You'll learn it, he said, already the expert on my condition, the way people are. Give it a week. Blind fellows always tell me the map builds itself in time. Blind fellows. I've been called worse by better. I'm sure it does, I said, and turned right, exactly right. No cane sweep, no hesitation, toward a door I'd known by heart since my first hour in the house. He explained a route I could have walked in the dark, which, technically, I do. But it was a useful 21 seconds. I got to hear a man decide whether to believe his own eyes. Because I felt him stop behind me. Felt the pause where a man's certainty catches on a splinter. I didn't look back. Looking back is for people who are allowed to see. Careful, Chloe murmured. You turned a beat too cleanly for a man who was just lost. I know, I said under my breath, cane tapping. That's why I paid him 20 seconds of confusion first. Confusion now, precision later. He'll forgive the precision because I already made him feel generous. Through nothing but instinct and the corner of the glasses, I caught David looking down at the folder in his hands. It was a list, I'd learn later. Routes, where the blind man should be walked and when. His thumb moved down it and stopped, not turning the page, just resting there on one line, the way your tongue keeps finding a sore tooth. Then he took out his phone, thumbed to a contact. I watched the little screen light the underside of his face. Eleanor's name, I guessed, from the way his jaw set. And then he put the phone away without calling. Because what would he say? Miss Sinclair, the blind man turned right too well? He heard how it sounded before she could, and he swallowed it. That swallow was the first brick I ever watched him lay in his own wall. Men like David don't get caught by their enemies. They get buried under the things they decided not to say out loud. He almost called her, Chloe said. He'll keep almost calling her, I said, right up until it's too late to matter. That's what doubt does to a careful coward. It doesn't warn him. It just makes him rehearse being surprised. That evening they talked in the dining room, the two of them, doors half open, a blind man standing by the window like a coat rack that had wandered in and been forgotten. The board will want the legal strategy laid out clean, David was saying. Prescott especially. If there's a gap, he'll put his whole hand in it. Then there won't be a gap, Eleanor said. Walk me through it, start to finish. Pretend I'm Prescott and I don't like you. That's not a stretch, David said, and got exactly 3 words into the next sentence before his eyes found me at the window and his voice dropped without his permission, sliding down to that under-register men use for the true conversation. Eleanor gave the smallest shake of her head, almost fond. He's blind, David. And David's voice climbed back to normal, embarrassed at itself. He lowered his voice, I thought. The glasses hear from nothing all the way up to 20,000 hertz. He can shout the whole confession into a marble hall if he likes. It's all going to the same place. All right, David said, louder, reassured. The authority to act on the estate transfers to you the moment the paperwork clears the notary. That happens before the will is even read. So when Prescott starts asking questions on Wednesday, you're already holding the pen. And if he demands to see the documents? He can see them. They're clean. Every signature is where it should be. David paused. Every signature is exactly where it should be, Eleanor. That's the whole point of doing it properly. Say that again slower and I'll start to think you're nervous, Eleanor said. I'm not nervous. I'm thorough. There's a difference. He straightened his papers. The notary has us down for Tuesday. First thing. In and out, no chatter, and by Tuesday afternoon there is nothing on this earth for Prescott to contest. And the doctor? David added, lower again, unable to help it. If Prescott goes to the doctor signed it off as a tired heart, Eleanor said, without heat. He wanted to keep it simple. I helped him want that. There's nothing for Prescott to find at the doctor's either, unless you keep saying the man's name like it's a spell. I say his name because he's the one who reads the room, David said. The others count votes. Prescott reads faces. Then it's fortunate, Eleanor said, that mine is a very good face. It is, I thought. It really is. But faces are the one thing I don't record for a jury. I record what the good face is arranged on top of, and I've got days of it now. Tuesday. The notary, Tuesday. I set it on the shelf beside Wednesday's reading, the doctor's dead autopsy, and the pill dish drying by the sink. My shelf was getting crowded. I've always liked a crowded shelf. Done before it's announced, Eleanor said, pleased, tasting it. Done before it's announced, David agreed. He said it the way you'd describe a clever tax move, and not a thing that would one day be read aloud, in his own voice, to a very quiet room full of people who had trusted him. He glanced at me again, just once. I stood at the window and watched the garden I wasn't supposed to be able to see, and gave him a face as empty as a switched-off screen. And after a moment, he looked away, and I owned him a little more than I had that morning. Eleanor stood, finished with the day. Tuesday, she said. Don't be late, and don't let the notary get friendly. She left. David gathered his papers, but he didn't leave. He drew a small paper diary from his coat, opened it to a page near the front, and I watched him take a pen and draw a slow ring around a date. He circled Tuesday. A grown lawyer, alone in a dining room, drawing a careful loop around a day in an old-fashioned book, as if putting it on paper would keep the paper from ever being read back to him. Then he closed the diary on his thumb and held it, thinking. At the door he stopped, turned, and looked back at me across the empty room. A long look. The look you give a locked door when you can't remember whether you left the key inside. I let him look. A blind man doesn't feel a stare. That's the rule, and I'm very good at the rules. I stood in it and felt nothing, visibly, expensively, until he gave up and went. He's counting the coincidences, Chloe said. Let him count, I said. The trouble with counting coincidences is you can always talk yourself back down to zero. Right up until the afternoon somebody shows you the total on a screen. The reading was 2 days out, and the board began to arrive early, the way weather does before it breaks, and that is how I met Prescott without either of us being introduced. He caught Eleanor in the corridor outside the meeting room, a heavy, unhurried man with the calm of someone who has watched a great many ambitious people trip over their own feet and has stopped finding it interesting. Eleanor, he said, before we all sit down, tell me about that Friday, the last few days. What was the house like at the end? She answered without a pause. That was the first thing wrong. Real grief stammers. It reaches for a date and drops it and has to bend down and pick it up. Eleanor laid hers out like a witness who had studied the transcript the night before. He was tired, but himself, she said. He worked in the morning. We had tea together at 4 in the study, the way he always liked it. He complained about the board. About you, actually, Prescott, if I'm honest with you. He went to bed early. That was the last real evening we had. Prescott nodded slowly through all of it and did not interrupt and let her finish every clean, well-lit detail. And the last morning, he asked, mild as a man asking after the weather. Who was with him at the end? No one was with him, Eleanor said. He liked to work alone. Arthur found him. The doctor came within the hour. Smooth, sourced, every name in the right slot. He was alone, Prescott repeated. Not a question, just the sentence set down where he could look at it later. That's the hard part, isn't it? Being alone at the end. It's the hardest part, Eleanor agreed. And I have to give her this. She didn't overplay it. A lesser liar would have wept. She just lowered her eyes the exact right amount. Then he said quietly, You remember it all very precisely. She remembered the time of the tea. I'd have called it impressive, except that impressive goes in the file too, right next to precise, right underneath rehearsed. I remember everything about my father, Eleanor said, and let a little grief crack her voice, perfectly, 1 beat too late to be grief, and 1 beat too soon to be nothing. I'm sure you do, Prescott said, and it wasn't agreement. It was a man quietly filing a page of his own in a drawer she couldn't reach. We'll talk properly on Wednesday. He turned and walked into the meeting room, unhurried, and did not look at her again, which unsettled her far more than if he'd stared. Eleanor watched him go. For 1 whole second the control slipped, and something crossed her face that she would never have let a seeing person catch. Then she folded it away and was smooth again. Down the corridor, a young clerk discovered something fascinating about the carpet. And in the far corner, half behind a pillar, David stood watching the entire thing, and I stood by the wall and watched David watch it. He took the little diary out again. He didn't open it this time. He just looked at the closed cover, at the ringed date he knew was inside, and held it the way you hold a bill you already understand you cannot pay. 2 men in that corridor were afraid of a Wednesday. Neither of them was the blind one. I found that quietly, professionally satisfying, and kept my face turned toward the wall. Another director passed and clapped David on the shoulder. Big week, the man said, cheerful, oblivious. She's holding up well, considering. Steady girl. Steady girl, David echoed, and his smile arrived a half-second late, the way mine used to when I still had to fake being fine. I know that delay. I've worn it. It's the smile of a man agreeing with a sentence he no longer believes. He's cracking, Chloe said softly in my ear. He's not cracking, I said. He's holding. Cracking would be honest. He's going to hold that smile all the way to the room, and then the room will do the cracking for him. Then Eleanor turned, and her eyes went to me, standing patient and useless by the wall, and for the first time in 3 days she looked directly at her blind man, and I felt the look land. "You," she said, "come with me." She didn't say where. She didn't have to. I pushed off the wall, found the floor with the cane, and followed the woman down the corridor toward whatever she had decided she needed a harmless witness standing next to for. And as I passed the pillar, David reached for that route folder on the side table, the neat little list of where to walk the blind man and when. He opened a drawer. He set the folder inside. He slid it shut without a sound. He hid the map in a drawer, as if the map were the problem, as if putting away the paper could put away the feeling that had started, somewhere under his good coat, to move. "He locked it away," Chloe said. "He put the map in a drawer," I said. "The map was never the thing that could see him, but he doesn't know that yet. On Wednesday, somebody will explain it." Part 4. The notary's office smelled of paper and old coffee. It was my first time outside the walls of the Sinclair estate in days. The first time Eleanor had chosen to carry her blind man into the world like a good luck charm. "Sit here," she told me, steering my elbow to a chair. "Right here. I won't be a moment." I sat where I was put. That's the whole art of it. Aim your face at the middle distance and let the expensive people forget the furniture can hear. The notary was a dry, precise man named Mr. Bell, the kind who has notarized 1,000 betrayals and called every one of them Clause 4. He laid a document on the desk and looked at me over his glasses. "And this gentleman is?" Cole asked. "He's with me," Eleanor said. "My personal bodyguard. He goes where I go." She said it lightly, but she said it on the record, in a notary's office, out loud. "You can speak freely. He's blind. Discretion isn't a concern." He's blind. Discretion isn't a concern. I have collected a great many sentences in my career. That one is going straight to the front of the album. Cole nodded and slid the document toward her. Through the glasses, I watched it come into focus on the desk. Close, clear, every printed line of it, the heading in plain type. Authority over the financial affairs of the estate. Her father not 2 days cold, and here was the paper that made his money hers. "If you'll sign here," Cole said, "and here, this grants you full authority to act on the estate's accounts, effective immediately, ahead of the formal reading." "I understand," Eleanor said, and signed, fast, a clean, confident stroke, and I recorded the pen and the paper and the exact tilt of her mouth as she did it. "And a second instrument," Cole went on, sliding another page across. "This one appoints you sole signatory on the estate's operating accounts. Again, effective at once. You're quite sure you want it dated today, rather than after the reading? Most families wait." "We're not most families," Eleanor said pleasantly. "My father would have hated delay. He built everything he had by moving first." He built everything he had by moving first. She said it about the man she'd moved first on. I filed the sentence next to the tea at 4 and the 3-second funeral. "As you wish," Cole said, and I watched him watch her. One careful, professional beat. The way honest men look at a thing that's technically in order and privately too fast. Then he did what honest men do. He notarized it anyway. Eleanor signed the second page. The glasses took the second signature the way they'd taken the first, patiently, without an opinion, which is the one thing that makes a recording worth more than a witness. It doesn't feel anything. It just remembers. Then she lifted the page and held it up, turned it toward me, waving it a little in the air between us. "Don't worry about him seeing it," she told Cole, almost playful. "He couldn't read it if I pressed it to his nose." She held a forged authority 6 inches from a hidden lens and told the room the one man who could see it was blind. I kept my breathing even. Somewhere, Chloe made a small sound that in another person would have been a laugh. "There's the standard question," Cole said, turning to me now, dutiful. "For the record, sir, can you confirm you were present and that Miss Sinclair appeared to act of her own free will, unpressured today?" Eleanor answered before I could. "He was right beside me the whole time. He'll confirm it." Cole waited anyway. He was that kind of man. He looked at the blind bodyguard and waited for the blind bodyguard to speak. "I confirm that I was present," I said. Flat, neutral. Not one word more than the record required. Alibi number 2, I thought. I'm beginning to feel like furniture with a microphone. Very expensive furniture in a very good suit, quietly notarizing your confession. Thank you, Cole said, and stamped the page, and the stamp came down in the recording like a gavel, and Eleanor Sinclair had just made a sworn witness of the one man on earth she should have feared. Time-stamped, Chloe said in my ear, low and satisfied. Signature, seal, the lot. She put it in front of a notary. She put you in front of a notary. Michael, she notarized it. She notarized it, I agreed, silently, my face a switched-off screen. 2 years, and today she filed the evidence herself. I should send her flowers. My condolences, by the way, Cole added, sliding the copies into an envelope. Your father was a client of this office for a long time. He'll be missed. Thank you, Eleanor said, already standing, already gone in every way but the body. He would be glad it's all in order. He would be glad it's all in order. I have heard a lot of last words about the dead. Hers were about the paperwork. Even Cole's pen paused, just slightly, before it capped itself. Eleanor gathered the envelope, thanked Cole with the exact warmth of a woman who'd gotten what she came for, and steered me back out by the elbow into the daylight, the good luck charm performing beautifully. David was waiting by the entrance, coat buttoned, unhappy. He fell into step with her and dropped his voice, and I trailed 3 paces back, blind and patient, and heard every word the way I hear everything. Prescott wants a meeting before Wednesday, David said. He's asking around. Quiet questions, the kind that don't stay quiet. No, Eleanor said. Eleanor, no, David. He gets his questions on Wednesday, in the room, after the authorities already signed and stamped, which it now is. She lifted the folder an inch. There's nothing left to stop. Let him ask. Let him ask, David repeated, and didn't sound like a man who believed it, and got the car door and glanced back once at the blind man on the pavement, tapping his cane against the curb, harmless as a lamppost. Back at the estate, David went to his office to make himself feel better, which is a thing men like him do with paperwork. Eleanor posted me in the corridor outside his door. Stay here, she said. Look useful. Then she left, and I stood where I was put, and through the open doorway, the glasses had a clean angle on David's desk, and David had no idea that the useless thing in the hall was the only camera in the county pointed at him. He was on the phone when I settled in. Yes, the bonding agency, he was saying. Hayes, Michael. I want to confirm the placement. Blind since the accident, references, the medical file. All in order? A pause. The voice on the other end asked him something. That's right, David said. The one Miss Sinclair brought on last week. I just want to be certain the paperwork's genuine. The medical, the certification, the placement history. You have all of it on file? Another pause, longer. A tinny voice answered, and whatever it said the right things, because David's shoulders came down half an inch. Good, David said. No problem. Just being thorough. You understand, with everything happening here, I like to know exactly who's in the house. Thank you. He hung up. Chloe's voice was a whisper of pure professional pride. The legend held, every line of it. He just called the front door, and the front door smiled at him. The legend held because Chloe built it to hold, brick by brick, 2 years ago, long before I ever picked up a cane. I don't record that part out loud, but I think it, and I think it warmly. David opened a folder on his desk, my folder, the file on me, the harmless blind man, and I watched him read it through his own doorway. He read the first page, turned it, read the second, turned it. On the third page, his hand slowed and stopped and hovered. There was a photograph clipped to that page. I knew which one. A photo of me, cane in hand, dark glasses on my face, the glasses looking back at the camera that had taken the picture. David stared at those glasses a long moment, the way you stare at a word you're suddenly not sure is spelled right. Read the fourth page, I thought, very quietly, the way you'd coax a man toward a cliff. It's all in there, David, if you just keep turning. Read the fourth page. He didn't read the fourth page. He closed the folder. He opened it again. He looked at the photograph one more time. Then he closed it for good and pulled open a desk drawer and set the folder inside and slid the drawer shut and took his hand off the handle like the handle was warm. Denial is such a tidy little room. He'd built himself one and walked straight in and closed the door, because the alternative was a hallway with a monster in it, and it's always easier to believe the monster is a coincidence. He sat back and said it out loud to the empty office, the way frightened men rehearse the version they want. Blind since the accident, he told the drawer. Vetted. Bonded. You checked. You called the agency. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. Second time this week that sentence had been spoken in this house by someone standing on top of everything there was. I was starting to think it should be carved over the front door. He pulled his little diary out again, the one with Tuesday ringed, and looked at it, and looked at the drawer, and for one moment I thought he might do the arithmetic that would save him. Line up the dates, the rushed notary, the rushed reading, the blind man who turned right too well. Add them, David, just once. Add them. Instead, he put the diary away. Some men can't add in front of an answer they can't afford. He'd rather owe the total later, all at once, than pay it now in pieces. Then he reached for his coffee machine and pressed the button, and the machine blinked a small, angry red light at him and did nothing. David looked at it. He pressed it again. Red light. He stood there, a lawyer defeated by a coffee machine on the worst week of his life, and something in him decided that this, at least, was a problem he could walk away from. He got up. He left the office. He went to find coffee, and left my file in the drawer, and left the blind man in the hall, and chose caffeine over the truth by a margin of one blinking red light. He left, Chloe said. He actually left. Coffee beat the file, I said. That's a good sign. When a man would rather solve his coffee than his suspicion, the suspicion isn't ready to be looked at yet. He'll look at it eventually. On Wednesday. On a screen. I stood in the corridor and tapped my cane once, gently, against the skirting board. The small sound of a blind man shifting his weight. The sound of the only witness in the house keeping himself company. That was when Eleanor came down the hall and stepped into David's office as if she owned it, which, as of 2 stamped pages this morning, she did. David came in a step behind her holding a paper cup, his hard-won coffee, looking calmer for having solved something today, even if all he'd solved was a machine. There you are, she said. We have everything we need now. The authorities signed, both instruments. The reading on Wednesday is a formality at this point. And Prescott? David asked, because he could not stop saying the name. Prescott gets to sit in a room and watch it already be done, Eleanor said. That's all Prescott gets. Stop feeding him in your head, David. He's a man with questions and no answers. We're people with answers and no questions left. She smiled. Next step is the board. Next step is the board. She said it like the last line of a plan. I heard it like the first line of mine. Next step is the board, David agreed, and drank his coffee, and never once looked at the drawer he'd just buried me in, while I stood in the doorway, being furniture, being harmless, being the only true thing in the room. Next step is the board, Chloe echoed softly in my ear. Next step is the board, I said, and behind me in the drawer sat a folder David never finished reading, and somewhere down the hall, a coffee machine blinked red at no one at all. Part 5. They read the will on a Wednesday, in a boardroom with a long table and too many chairs, and I stood against the wall with my cane and watched a woman walk into the trap she'd spent all week building for herself. Prescott caught her in the corridor before the doors opened. He didn't raise his voice. Men who own the room never have to. Eleanor, before we sit down, the board would like to hear your account of that Friday again. The last days. Humor us. Of course, she said, and gave it to him. All of it. The morning work, the tea at 4, the early night, the doctor within the hour. Smooth as a rail. Prescott listened to every word, patient, unblinking. Then he said, gently, "That's the same account you gave me 3 days ago. Word for word. The same details, the same order." A pause opened in the corridor. Just a beat, but I'd learned to hear beats. "Because it's the truth," Eleanor said. "The truth doesn't change, Prescott. Only stories do." "Stories don't change," Prescott agreed. "But people do. When they remember. A daughter telling me about her father's last week should get something wrong. A time, an order, which room. You never do. You'd rather I forgot my father already? I'd rather you sounded like a person and not a statement, Prescott said. Still mild, still deadly. But perhaps that's just grief. I've seen it make people very precise. Then we understand each other, Eleanor said, and smiled. And the smile was flawless. And that was the problem with all of it. Flawless is what you build. People are what you can't help being. Prescott found what I found on my first day in this house. Well done, I thought. You're only 3 parts late. Real memory drifts. It adds a detail, drops another, argues with itself. Hers came out stamped and sealed, the same coin every time, because she wasn't remembering a Friday, she was reciting one. Word for word, Chloe said quietly. Prescott gets his own file in the archive. He's the first one in this building who's actually dangerous. He's dangerous to her, I said, not to me. He's pulling on the same thread I am. He just thinks the thread ends at a lie. It ends at a screen. They went in. Behind Eleanor came David, last through the door, and for a moment the glasses caught him hesitate at the threshold, half turned back toward the corridor that led to his office, to a desk, to a drawer he hadn't finished opening. He didn't go back for the folder. He straightened his cuffs instead and walked in and took his seat, and somewhere behind him, in an empty office, a closed drawer kept my file warm, and he chose, one more time, not to know. Parker was already seated, a thin, careful director with a fountain pen, the kind of man who writes things down while others talk. He watched Eleanor come in. He watched the blind man let in behind her. He wrote something in a small book, and I would have paid a great deal to read it, except that I didn't have to. On Wednesdays like this one, everyone hands you their notes eventually. The doors closed, the session began, and I stood at the wall, a fixture, a coat rack, the most attentive machine in a room full of clever, distracted people. Eleanor opened a folder on the long table and laid the documents out one by one, and she explained them the way you explain a thing you're certain no one can challenge. This transfers operating authority to me, effective immediately, she said. This confirms my father's standing instructions. This one authorizes the accounts. Everything my father wanted, in my father's own hand. Through the glasses, I watched the pages spread across the polished wood, close and clear, the printed dates, the signatures, all of it laid out for a lens no one knew was in the room. Parker looked up from his little book. These are recent, he said. Some of these dates are only days old. My father knew he was unwell, Eleanor said. He wanted his affairs in order. Is a dying man putting his house in order suspicious now? Not at all, Parker said, and wrote something anyway, and I loved him a little for it. The quiet ones are always the ones who write it down. Prescott leaned forward and put one finger on a single page. This one, he said. This document is dated 3 days before your father died. It hands you the company. Did he sign it himself? He did, Eleanor said, in my presence. With witnesses? With me, she said. He trusted me. That was rather the point of being his daughter. Silence. 3 seconds of it. Every head at the table bent toward the page, studying the signature, weighing it, and finding nothing, because from where they sat, there was nothing to find. But the glasses don't sit where the board sits. From my angle, low and to the side, the recording caught what the tabletop hid from every honest eye in that room. The signature on that page was a shade darker than the letters around it. Different ink. A newer pen. A name written in by a steadier, colder hand than a dying man's. 3 seconds of silence, I thought, while the whole board studies a signature. All of them except me. I recorded it an hour ago, from the one seat in the house that could see the ink. David reached for the glass of water in front of him. He wrapped his hand around it. He lifted it halfway. Then he set it down again, untouched, and folded his hands, and I watched a man's thirst lose to his fear in real time. I'd like copies, Prescott said, of all of it, for the board's own review. They're the estate's documents, Eleanor said, smooth. You'll have certified copies through David, of course, once probate opens. Everything in its proper order. I'm sure you'd want it done correctly. Neatly played. She didn't refuse him. She wrapped the refusal in procedure and handed it back looking like cooperation. David nodded along, a half-second late, his water still untouched at his elbow like a small glass monument to a man who'd stopped being able to swallow. "Of course," Prescott said, and he smiled, and his smile was as false as hers, which meant that for the first time all week, two people in this house were lying to each other, and only one of them had it on tape. "It's all in order," Eleanor said into the quiet, and the quiet, having no proof of its own, agreed with her. The board moved on. But Parker wrote another line in his little book, and Prescott did not lean back, and the temperature of the room had changed by exactly 1 degree, the way it does right before something the confident people didn't plan. Then Prescott set down the trap she'd built and handed her the key, and she took it, because she'd never once imagined the lock was hers. "The board has a concern," Prescott said. "Not an accusation, a concern. Everything here rests on your account of your father's last days, his state of mind, his wishes, and it rests entirely on your word, Eleanor. We'd be more comfortable with an independent witness, someone who was in the house, someone with no stake in the estate." I already knew what she was going to do. I'd known since the first morning she counted the stairs for me. There is a specific kind of blindness that only clever people get, and it isn't in the eyes. It's the certainty that the tool in your hand could never be the hand around your throat. Eleanor turned, calm, almost relieved to have an answer ready, and she looked across the room at me. "My bodyguard was with me constantly in those final days," she said, clear, unhurried, for the record. "He was never more than a few feet from me. He can confirm my whereabouts and my father's condition for every hour that matters. Hayes, step forward." She just appointed me a witness for the prosecution, I thought. Out loud. In the minutes. "Thank you, Miss Sinclair. File it under item 5. I stepped forward with the cane, found the edge of the table with a light, practiced touch, and aimed my dark glasses at a point just past Prescott's shoulder, seeing nothing, recording everything, a sworn and blameless nobody. This is how the perfect ones come apart, not from the outside. A plan like hers has no seam an enemy can pry. It only has the one place she refuses to look, and she built her whole defense out of it, and walked it into a boardroom and called it a witness. The strongest piece on the board became the losing move the instant she was proudest of it. "Your name for the minutes," Parker said, pen ready. "Michael Hayes," I said. "And you were present with Miss Sinclair throughout the period in question?" "I was with Miss Sinclair throughout," I said. "True, every word. I have never had to lie in this house. That's the beauty of it. The truth, recorded from the right angle, does all the work a lie was ever asked to do." "Let the minutes show," Parker said, writing it, saying it aloud as he wrote, "that Mr. Michael Hayes, personal security to Miss Sinclair, is entered as a witness to the events of that week." "Entered as a witness," Chloe breathed in my ear. "Michael, you're in the record. She put you in the record. Her own minutes name you." "Her own minutes name me," I said, silent, still, my face a switched-off screen aimed at the middle distance. 2 years to get inside this family. She did the last inch herself, in front of the board, and thanked me for standing still. Prescott wasn't finished with me. He turned in his chair, and I felt the weight of a careful man's attention settle on the blind bodyguard. "Mr. Hayes, in those last days, did anything strike you as unusual? Anything you heard? Anything out of place?" The whole room waited on the harmless man by the wall. Eleanor did not tense. Why would she? She'd built me to be safe. "I'm not sure it's my place to say, sir," I said, mild, careful, aiming my glasses past him. "I only know what I heard, and I heard a house looking after a sick man, and then a house in mourning. That's all I can speak to." True, every syllable. I heard exactly that, and a great deal more, and I kept the more in a place his subpoena would never reach, waiting for a room with a screen. "Thank you," Prescott said, and something in him went quieter, not satisfied, resigned, a man who'd asked the one honest witness in the room and been given a wall that spoke politely back. Eleanor sat back down, satisfied, a woman who had just closed the last open question in the room. Prescott did not look satisfied at all. He looked like a man who'd asked for a witness and been handed a locked box and couldn't yet say why the wait felt wrong. The session ended. Chairs scraped. The directors filed out in their small, important knots, and I gathered myself off the wall and started for the door, cane first, harmless, done for the day. Behind me, low, Prescott spoke to his assistant. The kind of murmur a man uses when he's not ready to be quoted. Look into that account of hers, quietly. Something's wrong with this story, and I want to know what before we sign anything. Something's wrong with this story. I let the cane tap once against the parquet as I passed, unhurried, a blind man leaving a room he'd never really been in. He's right, I thought. Something is wrong with the story. He just doesn't know yet that he's standing next to the only copy of the true one. Out in the corridor, away from the board, Eleanor and David fell together the way accomplices do when a door closes. Their voices dropped to that private register they saved for each other, the one they used freely because the only witness in the hall was blind. That went well, Eleanor said. Prescott's got nothing. He can look into whatever he likes. He's looking into the accounts, David said. If he pulls the dates, the authority predates the authority is signed and witnessed. My father wanted it. I was there. Hayes was there. She let out a breath. It's done, David. He died of a bad heart and I inherited a company. That's the only story anyone can prove. He didn't die of a bad heart, Eleanor. David's voice went very low and very careful. The words of a man saying the true thing once, quietly, so he can pretend later he never said it. We both know what he died of. He died, Eleanor said, cold and flat, of exactly what the doctor wrote down. That's what the word means. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what can be shown. And nothing can be shown. There's no one left who saw anything. No one left who saw anything. She said it standing 18 inches from the only pair of eyes that had. If irony had a sound, it would be a white cane, tapping, patient, in a marble hall. You need to stop saying it out loud, David whispered. Even here. There's no one here, Eleanor said, but the wall and the blind man. Relax, David. Walls don't testify. That's the cleanest one, Chloe said, and her voice had gone very still, the way it does when the archive catches the piece that matters. Michael, hold on that. Hold on both their faces. That right there. That's the one we play last. That's the audio the whole room hears at the end. I held on both their faces, the two of them certain and close and unguarded, saying the quiet part into the one thing in the corridor that would remember it forever. That's the one we play last, I agreed, and turned my cane toward the door and left them their good afternoon. Down the corridor, Prescott had stopped near a window with his assistant, a young man with a tablet and a worried mouth. Prescott wasn't looking at him. He was looking back at the closed boardroom doors. Pull the account histories, Prescott said low, the transfer dates, and find out who this doctor is, the one who signed so fast. Do it quietly. I don't want her hearing my footsteps. A pause. Something's wrong with this story. I've sat across from 100 liars. She's better than all of them. That's what's wrong with it. Something's wrong with this story. I let the cane tap once, softly, against the parquet as I passed the two of them, a blind man finding his way out of a room he had never really been standing in. He's right, I thought. Something is wrong with the story. And he's going to spend weeks chasing dates and doctors to find the shape of a thing that's already sitting, finished, behind a pair of dark glasses walking past his shoulder. I could almost have told him, "Save yourself the trouble, Prescott. It's all here." But you'd have to wait for the room. Everyone waits for the room. Even me. Especially me. I walked out into the afternoon and left them all to their certainty, the accused and the suspicious and the quietly writing, and not one of them turned to watch the witness go. 2 days after she made me a witness, Eleanor decided she wanted a different one. I heard it before I was meant to, the way I hear most things. She was in the upstairs corridor with David, and I was at the far window being furniture, and she lowered her voice, which by now I found almost touching. "Find me a replacement," she said. "For Hayes. Someone new. Someone quiet who isn't already in the board's minutes with his name spelled out." "You put him there," David said. "I know I put him there. That was for the board. But I don't love that half the directors now know my bodyguard by name. Get me someone plain. Someone forgettable." A pause. "Keep Hayes on for appearances until I decide. Then we move him along." Move him along. After 2 years, she'd finally had the one good instinct of her life, and she'd have it for about 4 more minutes. "You want to interview the new man now?" David asked. "Bring him up," Eleanor said. The replacement's name was Blake. I heard him before I placed him, too. Big, young, careful on his feet, the walk of a man who's done real security and knows he's good at it. David walked him up and Eleanor looked him over the way she looked over everything now, as a thing that might be useful or might be a liability. "You come recommended," she said. "You know this kind of house? Big estate, private family, discretion?" "I'll know it in a day," Blake said. "Give me the floor plans and one walkthrough. I'll have every room, every exit, every sightline by tomorrow night." "And discretion?" Eleanor asked. "This family has private matters, things a guard might see and should forget." "I see nothing and I remember nothing," Blake said, smooth, rehearsed, the standard line of his trade. "That's what you're paying for." "I see nothing and I remember nothing." He meant it as a promise. From where I stood, it sounded like a job description I'd already filled better than he ever could. The difference between us was that his blindness was a choice, and it could change its mind the day someone paid it more. "Good," Eleanor said, and I heard her almost decide. She wanted this. A stranger with no name in the minutes, a man who'd forget on command. He was, on paper, everything she needed. Every exit, every sightline, it was the right answer. It was a professional's answer. And it was, I understood with a small private joy, about to be exactly the wrong thing to say in this particular room. Because Eleanor's eyes drifted from Blake, who did not yet know the house, to me, at the window, who apparently did not either. And some restless, testing part of her wanted to compare her two blind spots. "Hayes," she said to my back. I hadn't turned. A blind man has no reason to turn toward a window. "You've stood at that window for a week now. Tell me, what can a man see from there? Humor me." "Careful," Chloe said, instantly, a breath in my ear. "She's testing." "Give her a blind man's answer, not yours." But there's a better move than a blind man's answer, when the blind man is supposed to be a bodyguard. There's the answer that proves the cover instead of hiding behind it. So I gave her the guard, not the investigator, and let the guard be very good at his job. "Northeast aspect," I said, still facing the glass, unhurried. "About 70 degrees of open ground, 2 doors and the service gate inside the arc. 3 ways in, 3 ways out, if you count the low wall a man could take. I don't need to see it, Miss Sinclair. I mapped the sound of it my first day. That's the job." The room went quiet. Blake, who had promised to learn the sightlines by tomorrow, stood next to a blind man who just recited them from memory with his back turned. Eleanor looked at Blake. Blake, to his professional credit, said nothing at all, because there was nothing a man could say that wouldn't make it worse. "Thank you, Blake," Eleanor said. 2 words, a whole dismissal folded into them. "David will see you out." Blake went. He didn't argue. He knew a lost audition when he heard one recited back at him by the man he was there to replace. "That was neat," Eleanor said, and now she was talking to me, curious, turning her test over in her hands. "Most men I hire can't do that with their eyes open. How does a blind man count exits, Hayes?" "I don't count them, Miss Sinclair," I said, gentle to the glass. "I listen to them. Every door in this house has its own voice. The heavy one at the north end drags. The service gate ticks when the wind moves it. I've had a week of quiet to learn the difference. A seeing man never bothers. He just looks and forgets." "That's rather clever," she said, and I heard her file it as an asset, not a warning, which was the whole trick of my life. A clever tool is still just a tool. She would go to her grave, or near it, believing she was the only clever thing in the room. "It's only the job," I said, and let the compliment die politely, because a bodyguard who enjoyed being praised was a bodyguard who might one day want more than wages, and she needed to keep believing I wanted nothing at all. The rival knew tactics, I thought. He just didn't know the 3 exits. Net result? 0. Threats removed. 1 tactical argument spent. 1 position held. I'll take that trade every day of the week. "You keep him," Eleanor said to David, deciding it aloud, pleased with her own reasoning. "The new man's a stranger. Hayes already knows the house, and he already can't see a thing worth repeating. Better the blind man you've trained than the sighted one you haven't." Better the blind man you've trained. She walked out on that line, and it went straight to the front of the album, and I stood at my window, mapping the sound of her heels, 3 ways in, 3 ways out, one of them mine. But David didn't leave with her. David stayed, and I felt his attention come to rest, not on my face, not on my cane, but on the dark glasses, and stay there. He looked at them a long time, longer than a man looks at a thing he trusts. The way you look at a locked box when you've started to wonder what's ticking inside it. Then, deliberately, the way you make yourself put down a hot pan, he pulled his eyes away, turned, and walked toward his office without a word. He looked at the glasses, Chloe said. He looked at the glasses, I agreed. And then he made himself stop. That's the tell, Chloe. Not the looking. Everyone looks eventually. The making yourself stop. That's a man who's afraid of what he'll see if he keeps looking. I didn't follow him. I didn't have to. His office was down the corridor, and the corridor carried sound, and I had all afternoon. I took up a post near his door, a blind man resting, cane against the wall, and let the estate hand me its noises. The click of a laptop opening, the soft rattle of a man typing a name he was afraid of. I couldn't see his screen from the hall. I didn't need to. I knew the name he was typing because it was mine, and I knew what he'd find because Chloe had spent 2 years deciding, letter by letter, exactly what a frightened man would find if he ever went looking. He's searching you, Chloe murmured. Give it a moment. Let the legend do its work. The typing stopped. A pause while pages loaded. Then the small sounds of a man reading, the creak of a chair leaning in, the tap of a finger scrolling down a screen toward the one line I most wanted him to reach. There it is, Chloe said softly. He's found it. Certified instructor. Tactical orientation for the blind. 2 years of clean history, references, a real course with real graduates. Everything a nervous man needs to talk himself back down. Everything a nervous man needs. That line was Chloe's masterpiece, buried 3 results deep where it would feel discovered instead of offered. A blind man who trains other blind men to move through space like sighted ones. Of course he maps a house by ear. Of course he knows the exits. It's his whole profession. The suspicious detail, explained, defanged, and handed back to David as a comfort. I heard the laptop close. A soft, final sound. A man deciding to be reassured. Then, 5 seconds later, I heard it open again. David opened the laptop a second time, I thought, which means the first time didn't take. The explanation was good enough for his mind and not good enough for his gut, and now the two of them are going to argue about it all night. That's normal. That's exactly on schedule. Through the door came the sound of him picking up his phone, dialing, waiting. Then his voice, low, careful, the voice of a man checking a story he wants to be true. Yes, hello. I'm calling about a certification. An instructor, tactical orientation, works with blind clients. Hayes, Michael. Can you confirm he's genuine? He's placed with a family and I like to be thorough. A pause. Certified, good standing, years of it. I see. Thank you. No reason, just thorough. Just thorough. 3rd time this week a frightened person in this house had reached for that word like a handrail. He hung up. Then I heard the soft taps of a man typing a message instead of making a call, the coward's medium, and I didn't need Chloe to tell me who it was to. A moment later my guess was confirmed, because the estate is small and word travels, and Eleanor's phone would buzz that night with 3 words from David. Meeting in the morning. He wanted to sit across a table from her and be told, again, that he was imagining it. That's all denial ever wants. Not proof. Company. Someone to be certain next to. The agency had smiled at him, too, the way the front door always smiles, because Chloe built the front door. Legend holds, Chloe said, the instructor line's live. He's confirmed it himself now, twice. And he still opened the laptop again, I said. You hear that? He's confirmed I'm clean, out loud, from 2 sources, and the lid is open a 3rd time. Confirmation isn't the same as belief, Chloe. He's checked the lock, and he still can't sleep next to the door. I listened to him try. The cursor, I imagined, blinking in an empty search bar. The temptation to type one more thing, the real thing, the thing his gut kept spelling out for him. And then I heard the keys move again, slower this time, a longer phrase, a man typing the sentence he'd been circling for days. I couldn't read it, but I knew its shape. Blind, instructor, and a 3rd word, the dangerous one, the one that would end me if he ever let himself finish the thought. He typed it, he looked at it, and then I heard the soft patter of the backspace key, again and again, a man deleting his own best guess 1 letter at a time because he was more afraid of being right than of being paranoid. The laptop closed, the chair pushed back. Footsteps, toward the door, toward coffee, away from the thought. I lifted my cane off the wall and moved down the corridor before he reached the handle. Unhurried, harmless, gone by the time the door opened. A blind man who had never been standing there at all. He almost typed it, Chloe said. The whole thing. The word he keeps swallowing. He almost searched it. Almost, I said. And in the morning, he'll sit across a table from Eleanor and let her talk him back down, because that's what the meeting he just booked is for. Not to confront her, to be reassured by her. Two frightened people taking turns telling each other the house isn't on fire. But something had shifted tonight, and we both heard it. The legend had held, and David had still opened the lid 3 times. You can survive a man's suspicion. What you cannot survive forever is the exact moment his fear grows teeth and stops asking the internet and starts asking people. That moment was coming. I could feel it moving toward us down the week like weather. He'll push harder, Chloe said. Tomorrow, the day after, he's not going to let this go. No, I said. He isn't. And the day he stops searching a screen and starts pulling on a real thread is the day this gets dangerous for us, not just for them. So we get ahead of it. Tonight you start building the last file, the one we play in the room. You want me to start the final cut. I want the final cut ready before he's ready, I said, and lifted my cane off the wall and left him his last quiet night. One more evening of almost, before the week turned and someone, at last, finished the sentence out loud. David had booked a morning meeting to be told he was imagining things, and Eleanor gave him exactly that, which is the one favor that never helps. I stood by the door of her study while they had it, the blind man on duty, and listened to a frightened man ask for comfort in the only language he had left, which was procedure. I want to slow the board timeline, David said. A week, just a week, Eleanor. Let the noise die down. Prescott's asking questions, the accounts, the dates. Prescott is always asking questions, Eleanor said. That's what men do when they've lost. They ask questions of a thing that's already settled. And if he finds something in the dates? There's nothing in the dates but my father's signature and my presence and a witness in the minutes. She let a little iron into it. You're not slowing anything down, David. Slowing down is what guilty people do. We move fast because we have nothing to hide. Say it back to me. We have nothing to hide, David said, dutiful, hollow. Good. Now stop flinching. It's unbecoming. And that was the reassurance. She'd talked him out of the one instinct that could have saved him, the same reasonable voice she'd used on the doctor. David walked out of that study looking calmer and being, in every way that mattered, more doomed. So he went back for the folder afterward, which meant the reassurance had reassured him of nothing at all. I was in the corridor when he did it, resting against the wall, a blind man with all the time in the world, and I let the sounds of his office tell me the story the way they always did. The scrape of the drawer, the soft slap of a folder on a desk, the pages, turning slower now, a man returning to the exact place his nerve had failed him days ago. Page 3. Page 4. The one he hadn't let himself reach. He's reading the 4th page, Chloe said in my ear. Finally. Let him. Let him, I thought. This is the page. 2 years I've waited to find out whether one line of Chloe's holds a frightened lawyer's whole imagination. Let him read it. The turning stopped. A long quiet. And then, through the door, the smallest sound in the world, a man exhaling, the specific breath of someone who has just been handed permission to stop being afraid. There it is, Chloe murmured. He found the line. Certified instructor, tactical orientation for the blind. Read it, David. Believe it. You want to so badly. He wanted to. That's the thing about a good legend. It doesn't fight a man's suspicion. It agrees with everything except the conclusion. Of course the blind man knows the exits. Of course he maps a house by ear. He trains other blind men to do exactly that. It's not a mystery. It's a resume. I heard him reach for the phone. Dial. Wait. Yes, the instructor certification. Hayes, Michael. I want to confirm it's real. A pause. It is. Documented. Years of it. Yes. Thank you. No reason. No reason. He hung up on the truth for the last time, and he did it politely. Then I heard the folder close, and this time it closed differently, face down, decisive, the sound of a man putting a thought away for good. The drawer opened, the folder went in, the drawer shut, and David Maxwell, who had held the loose thread of the whole thing in his own 2 hands, tucked it into a drawer and chose, one final time, to be comforted. Chloe's masterpiece is that she never tried to make him certain, I thought. She only ever needed to make him tired. A man who's found one good explanation stops looking, because looking further would mean admitting the good explanation wasn't enough, and no frightened man wants to know that about himself. The door opened. David came out, lighter, a man who'd finally won an argument with his own gut. He saw me at the wall. He stopped. "Hayes," he said. "Mr. Walsh," I said, aiming just past him. For a moment, he looked at me the way he'd looked at me all week, searching, weighing. And then, for the first time, the weight lifted from his face. He'd decided. He nodded, to himself as much as to me, and walked past. I nodded back, a beat late, a blind man who'd felt him pass. And the glasses turned and followed David Maxwell down the corridor as he walked away from the last exit he'd ever be offered, and never knew the door had been standing open. "He's done," Chloe said. "He won't look again." "He won't look again," I agreed. He just talked himself all the way home, which means it's time. That night, I closed the door of my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and spoke to Chloe in the dark, quietly, the way you speak when a thing has finally come round to its hour. "Status," Chloe said. "Prepare the final file." 3 words. The only order I'd given in 92 days inside that house. Everything before them had been waiting. Everything after them would be a door opening. "Confirmed," Chloe said. There was something in her voice, steady but not small. "File 4087 is setted." "That many?" 2 years of them, she said. Every recording, every timestamp, every room she ever spoke freely in because a blind man was standing in it. 92 days inside this house, I thought. The other 21 months are the life we built to walk me through the front door. 4,000 files. She counted them all, alone, from a room I have never seen, so that on one afternoon a screen could say a thing no lawyer could ever unsay. 2 years. People ask me, in the part of my life I don't talk about, how a man waits 2 years for a single afternoon. They think patience is the hard part. It isn't. The hard part is the day you have to stand at a wall and hear a woman poison the last of a man's evening and do nothing, because doing something small now costs you the one thing that ends it for good later. Every day in that house I traded a small justice for the whole one. That trade is the job. It's also the price. I thought about the man who'd fired me, once, in another life, on a signature he never read. I thought about how badly the young man I used to be had wanted to shout in a room. And I thought about how the older one had learned, instead, to stand very still and let the room fill up with rope. "Integrity?" I asked. 24 months, unbroken. Nothing edited, nothing dropped, nothing that a court could call a cut. A pause. "It's clean, Michael. It's all clean." That was the word that mattered. Not clever, not damning. Clean. A recording that argues is a recording a good lawyer can kill. A recording that only remembers, whole and untouched, from the first hello on the staircase to the quiet part in the corridor, is a thing you cannot argue with at all. You can only sit in a room and watch it happen to you. "Anything else?" Chloe asked. "No," I said. And then I did a thing I had not done in 92 days. I reached up and took off the glasses. I held them in my 2 hands and looked at them, the plain dark frames, scuffed at one hinge, the most ordinary object in the world and the heaviest thing I had ever carried. 2 years of another man's crime lived inside them, and a father's last mourning, and every lie a clever woman had told a room she thought was empty. I set them on the table, gently, lenses up, still facing the ceiling out of habit. Still, even now, unwilling to stop seeing. Tomorrow they'd go back on. Tomorrow they'd do the last thing they were built to do. "Get some sleep," Chloe said. "Big day." "Biggest day," I said, and for once I did not have a joke ready, and the silence between us was the comfortable kind, the kind 2 people earn. The announcement came the next morning, in the main hall, and Eleanor made it the way you'd announce a coronation. Board meeting tomorrow, she told the assembled staff. Brisk, bright, certain. 10 in the morning, the full board, every director, no exceptions. I want the hall prepared, chairs for all of them, and everything perfect. The full board, every director, no exceptions. She was setting the table for her own triumph, and every name she added to the guest list was a witness she was inviting to my reveal, not hers. Around us, the house came alive with the small industry of a big morning. Chairs carried in, the long table wiped down twice. A young man wheeling in a screen and a projector for the presentation Eleanor meant to give, the polished summary of a smooth succession. I stood by the wall and listened to them set up the very screen I intended to borrow, and it took a great deal of 92 days discipline not to smile. They're bringing in a screen, Chloe said in my ear, and I heard the dark delight in it, held tight. She's providing the screen, Michael. She's providing the screen, I agreed silently. She's thought of everything. That's the trouble with thinking of everything. You furnish the room for whoever walks in last. Everything must be flawless, David, she said. This is the day it all becomes real, the day no one can question again. It'll be ready, David said. But he said it slowly, just a beat too slow. The words came out with a small drag on them, the tempo of a man whose mouth is saying yes, while something underneath him has started, very quietly, to fall. Eleanor heard it. She turned. Something wrong? David caught himself, steadied. No, he said, at normal speed now, forcing it level. No, everything's ready. He heard his own voice slip, I thought, and he corrected it, and the correction is the tell, not the slip. Somewhere in him, below the folder and the phone calls and the comforting line, a deeper part had done the arithmetic he refused to do on paper, and it had gone cold. He just didn't have a name for the cold yet. Tomorrow, at 10, someone would give it one. Eleanor let it go. She had a triumph to stage. She turned to me, last, the fixture by the wall, the safe blind witness she'd carried through the whole of it. You'll be there, she said. Not a question. Yes, I said. One syllable. She waited a moment, expecting nothing more, and got nothing more, and turned and swept out to go prepare her stage. One word, I thought. The whole exchange ran 12 seconds. A personal best for brevity, 92 days running. Save the rest for the room, Hayes. The room's tomorrow. Tomorrow, Chloe said in my ear. One word, same as mine. Before she reached the door, a clerk hurried up with the guest list. All confirmed, Miss Sinclair. Every director. Mr. Prescott says he wouldn't miss it. Of course he wouldn't, Eleanor said and smiled, mistaking a hunter for a guest. Prescott wouldn't miss it because Prescott still thought the answer was hidden in the accounts. He'd come looking for a paper trail and sit down in front of a screen instead. Everyone was going to be in that room for the wrong reason. That was the beauty of it. They emptied out of the hall, Eleanor to her plans, David to his office, the staff to their chairs and their polishing, and for a moment I stood alone in the center of the great room and let the glasses turn, slow, all the way around it. The long hall, the tall windows, the chairs lined up now in careful rows, one for every powerful person Eleanor had summoned to watch her become untouchable. The screen at the front, waiting, dark, aimed at all of them. For 2 years, this room had been a place in a floor plan, a thing I studied on paper in the life before this one. Now it was almost the last room of the story. Tomorrow, a woman would stand where that screen was and ask everyone she knew to be her witnesses. I could have told her then, in the empty hall, that she'd finally get her wish, that she would have more witnesses than she'd ever dreamed of, and that every one of them would remember exactly what they saw. But you don't tip a thing you've carried for 2 years on the night before it lands. You check the room once more and go to bed. She's asking a full board to be her witnesses, Chloe said softly, turning the irony over the way I had. Do you ever feel sorry for her? Even a little? I thought about it, honestly, the way I try to answer Chloe honestly. I feel sorry for the man in the chair upstairs, I said, the one in the portrait. Nobody's calling a full board to witness anything for him. That's what tomorrow's actually for. Not her. Him. I let the lens hold the empty room a moment longer, waiting, and then I turned for the stairs, cane first, harmless, a blind man going up to sleep before the biggest day of 2 long, patient years. Part 8. On the last full day of my old life, Eleanor Sinclair spent the afternoon directing the scene of her own destruction and asked me to stand very still in it. She had me in her office, and David, and a floor plan of the great hall spread on the desk, and she walked us through the next morning like a producer blocking a show. "The directors sit here, along the table," she said, moving a manicured finger across the page. "I stand at the head, by the screen. David, you're to my right with the documents." "And the presentation?" David asked. "Runs off the laptop into the screen, clean slides, succession, continuity, my father's wishes. In and out in 20 minutes, and then it's over, and it's mine, and no one ever asks again." "And if Prescott interrupts?" David asked. "He'll have questions. He always has questions." "Then I answer them, on the record, in front of the whole board, and I bury him in daylight," Eleanor said. "That's why I want everyone there, David. A man can whisper a suspicion in a corridor forever. He can't survive being wrong in front of a full room. I'm not hiding from Prescott. I'm inviting him to embarrass himself in public." She actually rehearsed it, standing at the imaginary head of the table, chin up, her voice sliding into the warm, grieving, unimpeachable register she'd wear tomorrow. "My father built this company. I intend to honor him by keeping it steady. Anyone with concerns may raise them now, in front of everyone, or hold their peace." She smiled. "They'll hold their peace." I listened to her practice the exact posture of a woman daring a room to doubt her and thought, yes, do that. Stand right there, chin up, and dare them. Tomorrow someone's going to accept the dare, and it won't be Prescott, and it won't be a whisper. The screen, the laptop, the slides. She was building the exact machine I needed and handing me the remote without knowing she'd done it. I stood by the wall and let the glasses take the whole plan, every position, every sightline. "And him?" David said with a small nod at me. "Hayes, where do you want him?" Eleanor turned to me as if remembering a coat stand. You'll stand at the back wall, center, where the board can see you. No movement, no talking unless you're addressed. You're there to be seen, not heard. Just look professional." Back wall, center, full view of the room. From a security standpoint, it was a reasonable call. From mine, it was the single best camera position in the building, and she'd assigned it to me herself, out loud, for the record. She's directing me to the perfect angle for her own exposure, I thought. Back wall, center, unobstructed view of every face in the room. I'll do my very best to look professional. "Understood, Miss Sinclair," I said. Back wall, still, professional. She stepped closer then and did a thing I'll remember for the rest of my life. She reached up and straightened the collar of my jacket and adjusted the dark glasses a fraction on my nose, tidying her witness, dressing the exhibit. "There," she said. "You clean up well, Hayes. Tomorrow you represent this family. Stand up straight, say nothing, look like a man who sees nothing and guards everything." A man who sees nothing and guards everything. She'd meant it as a description of a good bodyguard. It was, word for word, the truest thing anyone had said about me in 92 days, and she'd said it while personally adjusting the camera on my face. She's grooming me for the front row of her own funeral, I thought, and I'll be honest, when a woman straightens the very lens she's about to be undone by and tells it to stand up straight, it takes a professional not to laugh. I stood up straight. I looked, I like to think, extremely professional. "Good." She looked pleased. She liked a tool that took direction. "David, the director list. Everyone confirmed?" David opened his mouth, and the answer came out wrong. Not the words, the speed. "Everyone's confirmed," then he said, and there was a drag on it, a half-beat of hesitation laid under each word like a limp you're trying to hide. Eleanor's eyes came up. "David." "All confirmed," he said again, faster now, overcorrecting, smoothing the limp. "Full board, we're ready." She looked at him a moment longer than she needed to. Something crossed her face, a flicker of a question she didn't want to ask the day before her coronation. Then she decided not to see it, the way she'd decided not to see so many things, and looked back at her floor plan. That's the second time this week his mouth has betrayed him, I thought, and the second time she's chosen not to notice. They really are made for each other. Two people who've gotten this far by refusing, at the crucial second, to look directly at the thing in front of them. Then that's everything, Eleanor said, straightening. Tomorrow we finish this properly. She gathered her papers and swept out, already tomorrow's queen, and left the two of us in the office, the lawyer who was cracking, and the witness who was waiting. David didn't leave right away. He stood there, and I felt him turn toward me and look, one more time, at the blind man who unsettled him for reasons he'd argued himself out of a dozen times. He didn't say anything. There was nothing left for him to say that he hadn't already talked himself out of. After a moment, he exhaled, picked up his papers, and went, and his footsteps down the corridor were slower than a confident man's. Before she'd left, Eleanor had given David one more instruction, and it was the one that closed the last door. Load the slides on the room laptop tonight, she'd said. The one wired to the screen. I don't want fumbling with cables in front of the board. It all runs from that machine. It all runs from that machine. She'd just told me, without knowing it, exactly which laptop would be sitting connected to that screen at 10 in the morning, warmed up, tested, aimed at every director in the county. I don't build things like that. I just wait for frightened, tidy people to build them for me. Then I was alone in Eleanor's office with the floor plan of tomorrow still on the desk, and I spoke very quietly into the dark frame of my glasses. Chloe, tomorrow. Tomorrow, she said. Archives ready to deploy. When that room laptop opens the presentation, we'll have our window. Everything's in position. That night, David Maxwell did not sleep, and I know it because I watched his window. My room looked across the inner court to the wing where David stayed when the family kept him late, and his window was the only lit square in a dark house. I sat at my own window with the light off and watched his stay bright, hour after hour, and I did not need to be in the room to know the shape of the night he was having. I couldn't see the glass of water on his desk from across the court, but I've watched enough men not sleep to bet the house there was one, filled and set down and filled again, lifted halfway and never drunk. A small, clear monument to a thirst that fear had switched off days ago. I watched his silhouette cross the window and come back, cross and come back. The pacing of a man walking a circle around a thought he won't sit down beside. Once, the blue glow of a phone lit his face. He held it a long moment. I imagined the name on the screen, Eleanor, and imagined him pressing it, and I watched the glow stay on and on, unanswered, until he lowered it. She wasn't taking calls the night before her triumph. Even the accomplices don't get through at the end. Especially the accomplices. He set the phone down. He picked it up again. Half a number, I'd guess, then deleted, the way he deleted the search, the way he deleted every true thing the second before he had to face it. He couldn't have told you what was wrong. If you'd sat him down and asked, he'd have said he was tired, that it was a big day, that Prescott had spooked him. His mouth had 100 reasons. But somewhere below the mouth, in the older part that had moved a floor plan away from a blind man on the first morning, his body already knew. Bodies keep better records than men do. His had been quietly certain for days, and tonight it wouldn't let him lie down. I sat in my dark window and watched his bright one, the two of us awake across the same courtyard for opposite reasons. He was awake because his body knew something his mind refused to name. I was awake because after 2 years, a man likes to sit with the last quiet night and feel it end. There was a soft knock at my own door, near midnight. Arthur, of course. The old butler kept the same impossible hours the house did. Mr. Hayes, he said quietly through the door. I saw no light, but I heard you moving. Can't sleep either? Big day tomorrow, I said, opening it a crack. Dark glasses on even now, even here. For everyone, I think. For everyone, Arthur agreed. He glanced across the court at the one bright window. He hasn't slept in 3 nights, that one. Frightened of something and won't say what. A pause, the old servant's careful neutrality. This family's been frightened of the wrong things for a long time. Good night, Mr. Hayes. Good night, Arthur, I said, and closed the door and thought, even the butler feels the weather changing. He just can't name it either. Tomorrow I'll name it for all of them at once. You should sleep, I told myself, in Chloe's absence, and didn't. Once, in the smallest hour, David came down into the courtyard itself, a coat thrown over his shoulders, to stand in the cold and breathe. I watched him from my dark window, a heavy man with his face tipped up at a house that had started to frighten him. For a moment he looked straight up at my window, at the black square where I sat, and I held very still, and he saw nothing but glass, and turned away, and went back inside to his lamp, and his full glass, and his circling. The last man who might have stopped all of this, standing 10 feet beneath the only witness in the house, looking right at him and seeing a dark window. The light in David's window burned till the sky went gray. Near dawn, his silhouette stopped at the glass and stood there, looking out at the house, at the wing where the family slept, at, though he'll never know it, the dark window where a blind man sat watching him back. Then he turned away to dress for the worst morning of his life, and left the lamp on behind him, and left, I would have bet everything, a full glass of water standing untouched on the desk, catching the first gray light. In my own room, I did not watch the window any longer. I had a last thing to do, and it was the same first thing I'd done 92 days before. I sat on the edge of the bed with the glasses in my 2 hands, and Chloe's voice came in soft, the way it had on the marble staircase a whole life ago. "Final check," she said. "File 4087, integrity confirmed, 24 months, unbroken, marker set." "Good," I said. "That's everything, Michael. 2 years, it's all here and it's all clean." "Good," I said again, because there wasn't a better word, and I've learned not to reach past the right one. "You're allowed to feel something, you know," Chloe said, gentler than the job usually let her be. "Tomorrow, after, whatever it is you've been keeping in a box for 2 years, you're allowed to open the box." "I'll open it after the room," I said, "not before. A feeling before the room is a mistake waiting to happen. I've watched better men than me lose everything because they let themselves feel it one afternoon early." "After the room, then." "After the room," I said. "Then I'll feel all of it. I've got a lot saved up." "Anything else?" Chloe asked. I let the silence sit a second. "That was rhetorical," Chloe said. "Go to sleep, Michael." 2 years, I thought. 92 days in this house. Tomorrow, the whole thing comes down to about 12/100ths of a second, the time it takes a man to reach up and take off a pair of glasses. That's the math of it. 2 years of patience spent in one small motion of the hands. I could not wait to spend it. I turned the glasses over once in the dark, the scuffed hinge, the ordinary frames, the heaviest light thing in the world. Then I lifted them, and I put them on, and the dark room came up clear and gray in front of me, recording, the way it had recorded everything. I thought about the marble staircase, 92 days back, and a woman counting 6 steps for a man she thought couldn't climb them. I thought about a portrait in a dining room, and a chair that emptied too soon, and a pill dish rinsed before a doctor finished his sentence. I thought about every room she'd spoken freely in because a blind man was standing in it. All of it, waiting now in one clean file for one bright morning. There's a kind of stillness you only get at the very end of a long patience. Not excitement, not nerves, just a deep, level quiet. The quiet of a man who has finally arrived at the day he built his whole life around, and finds it exactly where he left it. "Recording's live," Chloe said. The same 2 words. The first thing she'd ever said to me in this house, and now, God willing, nearly the last. "Recording's live," I said back to her, quiet, in the dark, and lay down in my clothes and watched the ceiling through a lens that never closed, and waited for the morning she'd built me an audience for. Across the courtyard, a lamp burned in a guilty man's window until the sun came up and made it pointless. In the family wing, a woman slept the deep, clean sleep of a person certain she has thought of everything. And in a small room at the end of a servants' hall, the one witness in the house lay awake with his eyes open behind dark glass, counting down the last hours of the longest patience of his life. Tomorrow, at 10, she would gather every powerful person she knew into one bright room and ask them all to watch. And for the first and only time, I intended to give her exactly what she asked for. Part 9. At 10 in the morning, the board of the Sinclair company filed into the great hall, and I stood at the back wall, center, exactly where Eleanor had placed me, and watched the last audience of my old life take their seats. They came in their small, important knots, the directors settling along the long table, and the screen at the head of the room stood dark and waiting, aimed at all of them, warmed up since dawn on the laptop David had loaded the night before. Prescott came in last. He stopped inside the door, and he did the thing he'd been not doing for weeks.
He looked directly at me, the blind bodyguard at the back wall, and held it, a long, weighing look. Then he nodded once to himself and said nothing and took his seat. He still didn't know what I was. He only knew, in the way careful men know things, that the answer to his questions was somewhere in this room, and that it might be standing very still against the far wall. An older director stopped by Eleanor on his way to his chair. "Sad occasion made a hopeful one," he said, patting her arm. "Your father would be proud. Steady hands." "That's very kind," Eleanor said, and gave him the warm, grieving smile she'd been rehearsing all week. It was flawless. It was the last one she would ever spend in this house, and she spent it beautifully, on a man who would testify, within the year, that he'd been in the room when it all came apart.
I watched the hall fill from the back wall and did the arithmetic I'd done every day for 2 years one last time. The two of them I'd come for, the doctor, absent, who'd signed too fast, Prescott, who'd chased the right feeling down the wrong road, Parker with his little book, 10 directors, a screen, a laptop, and one blind man in the corner with 2 years of the truth behind his eyes. Everyone was finally in the room. It had taken so long to get everyone in the room. "Everyone here?" Eleanor asked at the head table, squaring her documents. "Yes," David said. It came out slow. Slower than any yes he'd ever given. Dragged and heavy, a single word with a stone tied to it. Prescott's head turned toward him. David's fingers were white on the edge of the document folder, gripping it far harder than a confident man grips anything. Eleanor didn't hear it, or wouldn't. She crossed to me instead, close, lowering her voice to the register she used for furniture. "You stand right here, back wall. Don't move unless I call you." She checked me over one last time, her tidy exhibit. "Understood?" "Understood, Miss Sinclair," I said. And then, for the last time, I played the blind man's oldest card in this house. "Would you tell me the way to the exit, so I know it, if I'm needed?" She paused, half-turned, a flicker of that old fond impatience. Then she gave it to me, slow and clear, the way she'd counted the stairs on my first morning a whole life ago. "The doors are behind you. Straight out, turn left, down the corridor. You won't get lost. You never do." A small, private smile. "Go on. Stand up straight." 12 hundredths of a second to the end of the operation, I thought. She's just told me the way out. I've known it since my first day in this house, but I wanted to hear her say it one more time, so it's on the record that she showed me the door herself. "Files ready to deploy," Chloe said in my ear, steady, low. "On your gesture." "On my gesture," I said, silent, and Eleanor walked back to the head of the table and squared her shoulders and began. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor said, and her voice filled the hall, warm and grieving and certain. "These have been difficult weeks. My father built this company with his own hands, and I intend to honor him by keeping it steady. There has been talk, questions, so let me put them to rest today, in the open, in front of every one of you." She let that land. She was very good. Even knowing everything, I could feel the room begin to lean her way. "I am asking each of you," Eleanor said, "as directors of this company and as witnesses, to confirm my lawful succession. Anyone with concerns may raise them now, in front of everyone, or hold their peace. I have nothing to hide. I never have." The hall went quiet. Prescott did not raise his hand. He was looking at me again. Down the table, David's hand drifted toward the phone in his pocket, and stopped, and hovered there, halfway, a man reaching for an exit that didn't exist. Eleanor took a step forward, into the light by the screen, and spread her hands, and asked the room full of powerful people to witness the moment she became untouchable. She asked everyone present to be her witness, I thought. All right then, I'll try not to disappoint her. I stepped away from the wall, one step out of the corner, into the room, and every head turned, because the blind bodyguard was not supposed to move, and Eleanor's mouth opened to correct me, and that was the last second of the old world. I reached up and took off the glasses. I did it slowly with both hands and folded them and looked out at the room with my own eyes for the first time in 92 days and let them see me see them. "My name is Michael Hayes," I said, and my voice was not the bodyguard's anymore. I'm a criminal investigator. I have been in this house for 2 years, and with Miss Sinclair's permission, since she has asked us all to witness the truth, I'd like to show it to you." I pressed the small control in my palm. The screen woke. Eleanor's clean slides vanished. In their place, the room filled with a picture the whole board could see, shot low and close from the height of a man's chest. It was the study at night. A hand moved at a small dish beside a glass of water, careful and unhurried, the movements of a person certain she is entirely alone. No one breathed. The picture ran only a few seconds. It was enough. It is always enough. Then the voices came, out of a corridor. Lifetime ago, clean and close and undeniable. David first, low and frightened. "He didn't die of a bad heart, Eleanor. We both know what he died of." And then hers, cold and flat, filling the silent hall. "He died of exactly what the doctor wrote down. It matters what can be shown. There's no one left who saw anything. Walls don't testify." The picture changed. A notary's quiet office now, a document held up in a pale hand, and her voice again, gentler, almost fond. "He's blind. Discretion isn't a concern. He couldn't read it if I pressed it to his nose." Then the boardroom, days ago, Prescott's own voice on the recording. "This document is dated 3 days before your father died. Did he sign it himself?" And hers, without a flicker. "He did, in my presence." Around the table, the directors who had heard that answer in person a week ago now watched the signature fill the screen, close and clear, at an angle none of them could have managed from their chairs. The darker ink, the newer pen, the name written in a steadier hand than any dying man's. In the corner of the screen, small and white and steady the whole time, a single line of text. 24 months. This is the whole of it in the end, not the cleverness. She was clever. The plan was clever, the forgery was clever, the smile was flawless. She had thought of everything except the one thing she had decided on the first morning not to check. She looked at a man with a cane and a pair of dark glasses and wrote a single word under him, blind, and built her entire safety on top of it and never once turned the word over to see what was written on the other side. A plan can be perfect in every part and still rest its whole weight on one unexamined assumption. Hers had. And an unexamined assumption doesn't care how clever the rest of you is. It simply waits, patient as a witness, for the day you stand in a bright room and ask everyone to look. Eleanor did not move. She stood exactly where she'd stepped into the light, her hands still half spread from asking the room to witness her. And she witnessed this instead. Down the table, David's hand had come out of his pocket. It hung in the air a moment, holding nothing. Then it lowered, slowly, and came to rest on his knee, and stayed there, because there was nowhere left in the world for it to go. The recording ran on, whole and unbroken, from a hello on a staircase to the quiet part in a corridor. The board of the Sinclair Company sat in the brightest room in the house and watched the truth happen to them. The only sound in the hall was a dead man's daughter learning, far too late, what a witness is. When the screen finally went dark, the silence held for a long moment, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses on the ears. Prescott broke it. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. "Call the prosecutor's office," he said, to the room, to no one, to everyone. "Now." A director near the door stood and went out with a phone already at his ear. Another sat with a hand over his mouth. Parker, quiet, careful Parker, closed his little book and set his pen on top of it. Finished. He looked across the table at Prescott, and Prescott looked back, and neither of them said the thing they were both thinking. They had spent weeks hunting a paper trail through the accounts. The whole answer had stood in the corner of the room the entire time, in dark glasses, saying nothing, holding the door for a woman who thought she'd hired a wall. Eleanor still had not moved. She looked at me across the hall, one look, the first time she had ever truly seen me. I watched her run back through every room she'd spoken freely in because a blind man was standing in it, and arrive, at last, at the size of it. She spoke once, only once, and quietly, and not to the room. "You were with me," Eleanor said, to me, across the hall, and her voice had lost every register she'd ever rehearsed. "The whole time. You were right there. The whole time." The whole time, I agreed. It was the truest thing either of us had ever said to the other, and it was the last. She had not misjudged whether I was there. She had only misjudged what being there meant. That is the mistake in the end. Not failing to see the witness. Deciding in advance what the witness could not be. There was nothing a good face could arrange itself into after that. She stopped trying. The smile she'd carried through every room, the flawless one she built each morning, simply left. And what was underneath it was just a person, at last, and far too late. David reached for the glass of water in front of him. His hand closed around it. He lifted it an inch. Then he set it down, untouched, the way he'd set it down in the boardroom, the way he'd set it down all week, and folded his hands and waited. 2 uniformed officers came in through the doors at the back. The room turned to look, then looked away, the way people do. One of them said David's name, quietly, a question and an instruction at once. David stood. He didn't argue. There was nothing left in the folder to argue with. He came around the table and walked toward the doors, past the head of the room, past the woman he'd tied his life to, and she did not look at him, and he did not look at her. 2 accomplices who had run out of quiet corners at last. His path took him past me. He stopped, just for a second, and looked at me. Really looked, the way he'd wanted to for weeks and never let himself. And the last thing David Maxwell saw before he turned for the door was me lifting the folded glasses in one hand and putting them back on, settling them on my face the way I had every morning for 92 days. His mouth moved. No sound came out. Then he turned and walked out between the 2 officers and was gone. I thought about the man in the portrait upstairs, then, just for a moment, the man who had ended my old life with a signature he never read. I had not done this for him. I'd done it because someone had to be in the room, and I was the one who could. But I won't pretend I didn't think of him, standing there in his own great hall, finally getting the witnesses his daughter had promised the whole city she would gather. There was nothing left for me to do. The proof was in the room, and the room had understood it. That is the only place proof lives in the end. Not in a drawer, not behind glass, but in the moment enough people finally see the same true thing at once. Somewhere in a room I have never seen, Chloe watched the file finish and let it stand. She would never walk into this hall. Her name would never be spoken here. But the small white line in the corner of that screen, 24 months, steady the whole way through, was her signature on all of it, and the only one that mattered now. I thought of the man in the portrait upstairs one last time. The one who had ended my old life with a stroke of a pen he never read. I hadn't done this for him, whatever he had taken from me. I'd done it because someone had to stand in that room, and I was the one who could. But standing in his great hall, I let myself notice that he had, at last, got the witnesses his daughter promised the whole city she would gather. It wasn't justice for him. It was only the truth, out loud, in front of people. Some mornings, that has to be enough. Then I turned and walked toward the doors. Alone, unhurried, without the cane, my own eyes open behind the dark glass. At the threshold, a guard stepped instinctively to the side and put out a hand, an old reflex, ready to steer the blind man safely through. "No thank you," I said. "I know the way." It was the last line I ever spoke in that house, and for once, it was the plain truth, with nothing at all folded under it. Behind me, the hall was filling with the sound of phones and low voices and a plan coming apart. Ahead of me was a corridor. Straight out, turn left, down the hall, exactly. As she had described it to me herself, twice now, on 2 mornings a whole life apart. I walked out through the door Eleanor Sinclair had shown me. At the threshold, the lens turned once and held the great hall a final time. The long table, the dark screen, the woman standing motionless in the light she had chosen for her own triumph. Then I stepped into the corridor. For the first time in 2 years, the recording held nothing but an empty hallway and the quiet. I let it run a moment longer, because after 2 long years of patience, a man is allowed to stand in a corridor and listen, just once, to the sound of a thing that is finally, completely done. Then I reached up and I switched the glasses off.